This is Matt Dillahunty from the Atheist Experience, and I am a proud LGBT ally.
Coming to you on Secular Media Network, this is the Gaytheists Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. I am your host, Callie Wright, and I am joined as always by my co-host, Jonathan Moore.
Hello.
And Daniel Wolfsong.
Hey there.
Today we're going to have a discussion about activism. I want to have a talk about what it means to be an activist and the different ways we choose to make a difference in our respective communities. At the end of the episode, of course, we'll have Be a Better Ally, where we'll talk about why for some people just living is their activism. But first, I want to share an interview with you. Kristen is another trans person I met at ReasonCon, and our schedules didn't exactly line up to get together in time for the wrap-up episode, but I wanted her to share her story and experience at the con as a trans person. So here's my interview with Kristen. Kristen, welcome to the Gaytheists Manifesto.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So you were the other trans person at ReasonCon.
I was.
Awesome. So I was really, really excited to meet you. So tell me a little bit about you.
Well, I'm 32. I'm a ex-Mormon, which was interesting when I was still a believer, but I'm no longer a believer.
We may have to have you back on the show for a later episode. I didn't know you were ex-Mormon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm currently going to school for a bachelor's and eventually a master's in healthcare administration. Let's see. I've been in the Navy for 2.5 years. I play paintball and airsoft regularly, and I love to cook.
Nice. So tell me about your experience at ReasonCon. Like, how was it for you as an atheist, as just a human being, as a trans person? Did you feel it was a generally welcoming and safe environment for you? Did you meet lots of cool people, that kind of thing? Just tell me what your impressions of the weekend were.
Well, when I came in here, I wasn't aware of a lot of podcasters, and I'll freely admit that. I'm kind of embarrassed to say it. I wasn't fawning over people. I wasn't saying, oh my gosh, there's so-and-so. No, I only knew of Tracy Harris and No Illusions, and those were the only two that I know. And so all the other podcasters, I would walk by people and not even realize it.
Well, yeah, and were you, because I remember there were a few people walking around who had lists on their phone, like, oh my God, I just heard about this podcast, I got to check it out. And I saw somebody had a list on their phone, it was like 20 different podcasts. Were you one of those people?
Yes, I was.
That's awesome. Well, and I think that's cool, because something that I said in the last episode is that a lot of times we tend to put podcasters on a pedestal, right? Because so many of us look up to podcasters. And I mean, I do too. Like, people like Seth Andrews and David Smalley and all of those guys. Like, I really look up to those guys, not because, I'm not an atheist because of podcasting, but I'm definitely an activist because of podcasting. So I definitely put those people on a pedestal. So it was probably a very interesting perspective to go there and not really have an idea who a lot of these people were. Like, I'm actually kind of jealous, if I can be honest.
Well, and to be honest, I showed up a bit late for ReasonCon. I actually had a laser hair treatment on Friday afternoon, so I had to stay home, get that done, and then start driving out there. I didn't get there to about 9 p.m.
Oh,
9-ish. Yeah.
And obviously you don't have to say where you're from if you don't want, but how long of a drive was it for you?
Oh, it's about 7 hours. I was in Virginia.
Okay. Yeah, it's about a 7-hour drive for me too, from Ohio.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, anyways, just, I mean, as a trans person there, did you feel, welcome and safe and all of that sort of stuff?
The impression I got was a tone of indifference towards being trans, and honestly, that was my highest expectation, what I was looking forward to. Nobody treated me like I was special, that I was some kind of rare magical unicorn. I'm just a normal person like everyone else, and that was it. And that actually really made me happy.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, that was exactly my impression. I mean, if the conversation went that direction, people were generally very interested in hearing what I had to say, especially, surrounding what I do with the show. But, other than that, and I mean, I had the opposite experience. I went there going there, and there were probably 30 or 40 people that I've known for a while that I was really, really excited to see. And not even necessarily just in a hero way, just like, hey, we've become really good friends because of this podcast thing, and I've never met you in person before. But yeah, I mean, that was my impression too. Like, once all of that was over with, it was just like, we're just hanging out. We're just people, and we're here at this atheist convention, and we're talking about, humanism and activism and ways to make the world suck less. And and I don't know if you heard the interview that I did with Hugh Man on the last episode.
I did.
But that was, and that was his impression too. Like, it was just no big deal. Like, we're just people. And, on one hand, that's kind of tragic that's what we're so surprised and shocked about.
Yeah, I have a small bone to pick with Hugh Man.
Uh-oh.
Because when he puts on his medical form, I'm a unicornist, I'm on the other side of that form.
Oh, so you're a unicornist.
No. I'm on the other side of that form in the hospital having to deal with this in the administration side.
Oh, well.
And we can't, go and ask patients, hey, is this a joke? Somebody call HR. What is this?
Well, I'm sure he was going to hear this, and I will be sure to let you know what he says.
No, so part of the responsibilities of being in healthcare admin is that you have to take care of patients and their religious needs.
Sure.
And so when you don't know much about what they are, you have to start Googling this and looking it up and asking around. And if the patient isn't able to give you any information, you have to do a lot of the legwork on your own. So even if it sounds ridiculous, we got to take it seriously.
Sure.
So I would actually have to call HR and ask about what an unicornist is.
Well, Hugh, my friend, you have some explaining to do then. We're gonna have to educate people on what it means to be an unicornist, so we can help our healthcare admins be better allies to you guys, because being a better ally is something this show is all about.
On my first day I was here in ReasonCon, I was walking around trying to figure out what to do, how to get registered, how to get my little name tag. There's somebody doing something in the main room with the speakers, and then I hear this magical voice, and it's like, oh, I know that person. That's Noah.
Right.
And I go in there, and it's like, where's Noah? And he looks completely different than how I imagined him to be.
Yeah. I've been friends with him on Facebook for a while, and I was surprised when I saw the picture. And I think that's always the case. I think it's really easy to get a picture in your head of what somebody should look like based on their voice, and for some reason, at least for me, it's never right. Never even remotely right.
See, I had this picture in my head that Noah would be like Newman from Seinfeld, like a big burly guy, and that was not the case.
Oh, that's funny. I'm gonna have to make. I don't think Noah actually listens to this show, but I'm gonna have to point him to that.
I made other comments that I'm not going to repeat here, so I'm sure he's got a few choice words back at me.
Oh, that's great. So speaking of Noah, I've actually met and talked to him for a minute at the con. And we've talked on Facebook before, and obviously the scathing atheist is the offensive humor, and the we're gonna joke about things that people say shouldn't be joked about, and that kind of thing. So as a trans person, tell me how you feel about that kind of thing.
I think Noah and the scathing atheist are equal opportunity offenders. And I would liken him in the show to South Park, where nothing's off limits, everything's a target, everything will be parodied, and you will take the ticket around the carousel of mockery. It happens. Take your lumps, take a laugh, enjoy it. It'll be someone else's turn soon enough.
Yeah, I hear that. Because there's definitely a thing in the trans community, and even the queer community too. And even when it comes to race, you don't generally like to hear people who have no idea what your experience is joking about your experience, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't always necessarily think it's impossible for those people to get it right. For example, there was an episode of The Scathing Atheist where he used the word tranny a few times.
Mm-hmm. I heard that one.
And generally speaking, I don't think that word is any different than calling someone a fag or using the N-word for a black person.
Uh-huh.
But
which he has also used.
Right. But the context was that he was making jokes about what a bigot would call the group of people who were checking a trans person's genitals on the way into the bathroom. And when I heard that, I was I'm still a little conflicted about it, to be honest. Like, I have a friend who pointed it out to me on Facebook immediately, and she said, "Hey, they did this," and I was like, "Yeah, like that's pretty much almost never okay." And I know she sent him an email, and the email that she got back said something, analogous to that, like, the context and all of that sort of stuff. And I was like, I kind of agree, but I'm still kind of not okay with it. I don't know. I don't know exactly where to stand on that.
With my stance is that I generally give comedians a pass on that kind of thing. I do consider the show to be of comedic value, and Noah and Heath to be comedians.
Sure.
And they'll say the N-word. They'll go after every minority, all of the above. And when if I think it's okay to go after one group, I shouldn't be offended if they come after my group.
Sure.
And so,
yeah, I hear that.
Just laugh, take it with a grain of salt, know that he's not being malicious with it, and let it pass. That's just how I consider it.
One thing that I've heard that's always kind of stuck with me, do you know who Lisa Lampanelli is?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay, so she's an insult comic, and that's like totally her thing. She gets on stage and she makes fun of people, and she says really horrible, insulting things about people. And she's generally really funny. And she said after her shows one time, a guy in a wheelchair came up to the front of the stage and was pissed that she didn't make fun of him. And so I definitely hear what you're saying in that, like, well, if he's going to make fun of everybody but not me, that's sort of another form of exclusion, right?
Yeah, there shouldn't be any sacred do not touch minority that you're not allowed to make fun of if you're going to make fun of other minorities.
Well, right, and I definitely think that there's a way to do it with tact sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, you can do it without being malicious, and it can still be funny. And honestly, I'm still undecided about that whole thing. Like, I hear my friend's perspective, I hear your perspective, and I feel like I sit somewhere in between. And I'm going to do an episode about comedy and humor at some point, and I'm going to try and have Noah on the episode to get his perspective.
Oh, yes. I generally give people the benefit of the doubt. I genuinely believe that 99% of insults and slights of that kind aren't intentional. I think that they're circumstance or unknowingly or ignorance of that kind. I can't believe people are really that malicious all the time. There are some people, but generally most people tend to be good people.
Yeah, I definitely hear you on that. And I hear that, but then I also think about people who have had seriously traumatic experiences, and like they can know that it's not malicious, and sometimes just hearing the word is enough to set somebody off because of an experience that they've had. And I want to honor and respect that too. But at the same time, you never know what somebody's triggers are. Somebody could be triggered by talking about a car.
Oh, I know. I've been to many transgender meetup groups. There are many landmines to be avoided.
Yeah, and it's all valid stuff. You know what I mean? That's the thing. Like, I'm not a person who says that to be dismissive of it. Like, I definitely want to honor and respect that. But that's that's the difficulty, because I want to laugh. I want to have a sense of humor, especially about my own situation, because I'm that kind of person. I like to laugh. I like to have fun. And some of the best trans jokes I've ever heard have come out of my mouth. You know what I mean? But that's me choosing to make it humorous for my own benefit. You know what I mean? It's not somebody else like punching down, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, if you can't make fun of yourself now and then you're going to go nuts. That's just...
I completely agree. Even as atheists, which is
like,
yeah.
If you trip and fall in front of a group of people, then you're obligated to say, well, it's a good thing nobody saw that, because that would have been embarrassing.
Right, exactly.
And then everyone laughs.
Awesome. Well, one thing that I love about interviews on this show is that I am so not the person who's like super strict about keeping things totally on topic, and I love that this conversation went this direction. Because if you listen back to a lot of interviews, it'll be like, we're talking about one thing and the conversation ends up somewhere completely different. And I love that so much. I don't ever want that to change. But, that's me being a professional broadcaster.
You're just talking long, making discussion, and someone shouts out, "Squirrel!"
Right, exactly. Well, so give me your final thoughts on ReasonCon. Like, are you stoked for next year? Are you planning on going next year?
I'm definitely going, provided that circumstances allow.
Sure.
I'm taking a accelerated bachelor's degree, which means there's no summer breaks. There's no any breaks, actually.
Oh, God. Hats off to you.
Each semester is like 5 weeks long, and it consists of 10 days total, and each day is like 5 hours, so it's technically 50 hours per class, and it's just class after class after class after class.
Wow.
So
I salute you for that.
But it's for a good cause.
It is for a good cause. Speaking of good causes, are you cool with talking about your website? Is that something you're cool with talking about?
Sure,
okay.
Yeah.
So you've got this awesome website that you told me about. Tell me about it.
Well,
tell me what your goal is and all that sort of stuff before we go here.
Okay, I'd like to preface this by saying that I am not a scientist, I am not a doctor, and I am not a professional web developer, as anyone will clearly see. But I created a website called justachoice.org, and it lists a lot of scientific facts and research papers and things of that nature that describe why sexuality, gender identity, and intersex conditions are not a choice. And they actually have a biological causes to it. And the reason why I created this kind of thing was for two reasons. It's whenever I see an argument, either online or in person, regarding homosexuality, for and against, and it eventually devolves into saying, well, homosexuality is a choice, you can't prove that it's biological. And that's usually a conversation stopper. And it really shouldn't be, because there's a lot of information out there. It's just scattered. And I'm really surprised that a website like this does not already exist. Like a one-stop, here's all the facts kind of resource. And the other reason why is one of my trans friends, we were having a conversation where she wished that she was intersex. And that struck me as a little bit weird, and I asked why. And she said the reason is because that she would somehow feel validated by being transgender, that she can say that this really is a valid medical thing, whereas being as trans, she didn't think that she was a valid thing to do. And that kind of weirded me out, because there's a lot of research that says that no, trans is actually a real medical condition. It's measurable in the brain. So
right, and I think, doesn't that, and if you know more about this than I do, correct me, but being intersex, really at the core of it is about chromosomes, right? There's not necessarily an outward physical manifestation of it.
There is actually sometimes physical manifestations.
Right, I know there is sometimes, but not in all cases,
yes.
Right?
No, in fact, most intersex people don't even know they're intersex. One of our trans women who recently just had SRS, she went in to get the surgery, and the doctor was surprised to find ovaries on the inside of her body. And she had no idea.
Huh. Yeah, so that's, again, that's probably another conversation, but but yeah, I think that's important, because and part of me thinks that's really sad. Like, you shouldn't have to have, because obviously, so in that person's view, being intersex meant that there was some sort of outward physical manifestation, even though that's not always necessarily the case, but that someone felt that they needed that to validate who they are. Like, right. I think that's a pretty sad commentary on the state of where trans people are in society, And
there's not, the research is out there. It's difficult to point to if you don't know what you're looking for.
Right.
And me being in this career, I have a wealth of information and resources at hand where I can talk to my doctor, who's also the director of the program, and I can talk to Centara Healthcare and talk to their physicians, talk to their healthcare providers, and get this information firsthand. And they can point me in the right direction, saying, yeah, there's this study, and there's this study, and there's this study, and here you go.
Well, that's freaking cool. I really, really salute you doing that, because I know, I have friends who do web stuff, and I know that it takes a ton of work It is not easy, and doing it for something like that is definitely a thankless job. So I salute you, my friend. And
it is difficult work. It is like, I don't know anything about website building. It looks like it needs polish, but my homework is being neglected for this website.
Well, if I have any listeners who have web development experience and who are interested in helping with this website, please email me, thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com, and I will forward your contact information on to Kristen.
Sounds great.
Kristen, I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time to talk with me today. I'm glad our schedules aligned where we could get this out, because I think it's super important that we have another trans person's perspective on the ReasonCon experience, and I really, really, really hope that I get to see you next year.
Oh, thanks. I want to see you too.
All right. Yeah.
And I just want to say one thing,
Sure.
In case the fans who didn't go to ReasonCon, Noah is an amazing juggler. You guys missed that if you didn't go.
Oh my God! Right. I saw that, and he was doing all that behind the back. Oh, yeah.
Doing 5 at once.
Yeah. I was mesmerized.
There should be a video floating around there somewhere. I think Andrew took video of it.
Oh, I'm gonna have to make sure Andrew posts that. All right, Kristen. Well, thanks again for taking the time. We will talk soon, my friend.
All right. Thank you very much.
We'll be back to talk about activism right after this.
I'm Daniel Radcliffe, and I believe that reaching out for help is the bravest thing a person can do. If you are struggling and need support, call the Trevor Lifeline at 1-866-488-7386. It's free and confidential, and trained counsellors are there to listen 24/7 without judgment. To learn more about the Trevor Project's life-saving work for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or questioning young people, go to thetrevorproject.org.
Welcome back to the Gaytheist Manifesto. Today we're going to have a conversation about activism, what it means to be an activist, and how we choose to make a difference in our communities. See, we often put certain kinds of people on pedestals, whether in the LGBT community, the atheist community, or any social justice movement, really. And I get it, I really do. I do the same thing. So this isn't me looking down on anyone by saying this, but I do think it's important to recognize that there's more to activism than protests, marches, lobbying the government, or podcasting, or doing a TV show. Dictionary.com defines activism as the doctrine or practice of vigorous action or involvement as a means of achieving political or other goals, sometimes by demonstrations, protests, etc. I think the etc. part is often forgotten. The root of the word is act, right? Something I like to say is that there's no hierarchy in activism, or at least there shouldn't be. Sometimes the really not glamorous things are the things that make the most difference. What about people that hand out pads and tampons to the homeless? Because sometimes homeless women will get themselves arrested so they can get them. What about sitting down and giving your time to a homeless person who has no one just to remind them that they're a human being and that someone cares about them? What about lending your ear to that queer or trans Facebook friend you don't know super well when they're in a bad spot and they say they need somebody to talk to? All of these things count in my book, and none of them are any more or less important than what I do, what we do, or what anyone else in these movements does.
This is a really interesting topic to me. My boyfriend and I, we've actually done some outreach for the homeless folks in our area. We live in northern Richmond, and there's a huge homeless population here. And we've put together food and supply kits to hand out to them. And not saying this to get accolades or anything like that, but I think it's important to be a part of your community and to treat especially when it comes to homeless people, because they're treated as outcasts and as a scourge in most cities. And something that I noticed while we were doing that was, even there were times when I was maybe just walking straight ahead towards this homeless person, and most people, when they see someone approaching them, would look up, and make eye contact. And a lot of these people, they didn't even notice me until I was literally right up on them and talking to them. And to me, it seemed like they're so used to being basically invisible to people that they don't even acknowledge someone who actually does see them and wants to talk to them. And That made me sad. That was kind of hard to experience, and gave me a little bit of insight into maybe how they view the world. But
Jonathan, what are you thinking?
Oh, I was just thinking about what Daniel was saying, how it's true, and I've been guilty of that myself. You know, where it's just so difficult that you kind of want to tune it out almost. You know, because it's like you start getting in that mindset of what can I do, but you know, you just do what you can, the little bit that you can do. You know, like Daniel said, you know, he's doing things with food, and I really admire that. You know.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to let, you know, the problems of the world kind of weigh you down. And I think a lot of times when we talk about the problems that we're trying to solve as activists, you know, I mean, these problems seem insurmountable. I mean, they're obviously bigger than me or you guys or you know, any like certain group of people. And it's really easy to just be overwhelmed by that. Like, there's nothing that I can do. You know, but I think it's really important to recognize that, like, you know, we're all small parts of the world, right? So, like, if you change somebody's life, you are changing the world. You know what I mean? It may not be something you're not going to be remembered for the next 50 years, like Beethoven or something like that, like, or a couple of 100 years, my history knowledge. But I mean, that stuff matters, and that's the whole. So basically, the thing that made me really want to talk about this, and I'm probably going to be talking about ReasonCon for freaking 6 months, but like, you know, people look up to people who do podcasts and people who are out there in public doing, you know, lobbying Congress and leading protest marches and making speeches and all of that sort of stuff. And all of that stuff is super important. Like, I'm not trying to dog on that stuff. I mean, that's stuff that I do, and I think it's really important. But the thing for me is, I think we have to recognize that that's not all there is. You know, sometimes activism is just recognizing that somebody needs a shoulder to cry on and giving it to them, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I've done small things, you know. I mean, when I had my own place, me and a roommate, we had a couple friends that would otherwise have been homeless because they lost their jobs and such, and we let them stay with us until they could find something else, because otherwise they would have been out on the street, you know. And one of them was with us for 6 months, and we actually eventually had to kick him out because our landlord told us we had to. But
you did what you could. That's the point. You know, I think people get themselves convinced that they have to do these big things, and they have to, like, figure out a way to quit their job to do activism full time, you know, in order to make a difference. And that's really not the case. I mean, if all of us did really small things, like if everyone did really small things, like, I feel like we could solve these problems like overnight. It's not that people aren't doing enough, it's that there aren't enough people doing the small stuff. And I think a lot of the reason people don't do the small stuff is because they feel overwhelmed.
Did you hear recently in the news about the people that were getting arrested for feeding the homeless?
Yeah, it's in some states it's illegal to feed homeless people. That was one of the things I actually checked before Derek and I went out, was to make sure. In Virginia, it's not illegal, but it is. There are a number of states where it's illegal to do that.
I don't understand.
One of my favorite things that I saw as a result of that Indiana religious freedom bill, because I guess there are some cities in Indiana where it's illegal to feed the homeless. And there were people who were claiming, like, you're violating my religious freedom by not letting me feed the homeless. And I thought that was fantastic. Like, if people were fighting for their religious freedom to do good for people, go for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Good for them.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, Callie, when you were talking about the reason some folks don't do anything is because it just seems like such a big job to be done. And what can I as one person do? And I think that's why we often equate activism with being this big, huge, really sort of a lifestyle choice that and a lot of people don't identify with that. I know plenty of people who I've talked to who tell me, you know, going out to protests and marches, it's I can see the good in it, but that's not something that I feel comfortable with, and that's not really, you know, that's not me, and that's fine. Activism is such a multifaceted thing, and you know, like you were saying earlier, Jonathan, or I think both of you have been saying it. To me, activism is just doing what you can to make the world a better place through action. And sometimes it can be a small thing, sometimes it can be a big thing. The small things are often the big things.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people, lots of people have added me on Facebook, because of the show, and it surprises me sometimes. They'll send messages to me, and it seems like they're surprised that I respond.
Yeah,
and I feel like doing a podcast and stuff. It's easy to make. I guess it's easy for me for this whole thing to make us look like we're much bigger of a deal than we are. You know what I mean?
Oh,
and,
yes. Entourage.
Right. But I mean, for me, it's like, well, why am I doing this if not to help people out? You know what I mean? Like, am I really just going to say, like, well, my activism starts and ends, it starts when I start the run sheet for the show and it ends when I finish editing the show and send it up to Secular Media Network, Like, what am I actually doing if that's all I do? Like, am I just a narcissist? Like, I want to be podcast famous or something like that? Like, no, that's not what it's about for me.
Well, you are pretty fabulous, Callie.
Well,
so.
I mean, I'll take that. But
I think whenever you have somebody speaking with an audience, other people are going to look to that person or those people, and it's almost, I think it's probably ingrained in us culturally to, when you see someone speaking and there's an audience, that person must be important, and if they're important, they're probably too important for me or someone like me. And I think that's why there's a natural response for people to think, wow, they actually responded to my message. That's pretty amazing. And it shouldn't be, especially when we're doing the Gaytheist Manifesto, not just to subvert the stronghold that religion has on this country, especially as it intersects with the LGBT movement, but as a reach out to folks who are feeling alone and who feel that they don't have the support system to do some of the things that we do, and to even feel the way that we feel about being gay and trans.
Yeah, I mean, the best compliment that I ever get from anyone is, "Wow, this show made me feel less alone."
Yeah, that's the most amazing thing.
The first time I got one of those messages, it was like, well, okay, like, if for some reason another episode doesn't happen, then, like, we've done something good here. You know what I mean? And I think you have to strike a balance between not resting on your laurels and celebrating the things that you actually do, right? Because I could have, the first big thing that I really did was I gave the keynote at Cincinnati's Transgender Day of Remembrance ceremony. And I don't know if I've ever been more nervous in my life, because I've always wanted to do public speaking, but that was only the second time I'd really ever done it. And the second time I'd ever done it as Callie. So it was a really big deal for me, and it felt really good afterwards. And I was like, well, this was a big thing. Like, I want to congratulate myself for this, and I want to be proud of myself, but I can't pretend like the journey's over here, or that I can be like, well, done my part, guys, see ya. And I think a lot of times people get too far to the extremes either way.
I think it's important to remember that social injustice tends, if we look at our history, there's a tendency towards social justice. So an unjust today usually turns out to be a more just tomorrow. That's been our history. Would you guys agree?
I think so.
So I think what will always remain, and I mean, don't mean to be a downer about it, but people will. There are always going to be lonely people, even after all the social injustices have been assuaged. There's always going to be lonely people. There are always going to be people who feel like they don't belong, and who need to know that there's someone out there who relates and cares. And
I was so hoping you were about to quote the end of the tagline for the end of the show.
That's your job.
Sorry.
Don't make me do your job.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that's always going to be the most important part of our journey with the Gaytheist Manifesto is that reaching out and building bridges where there are none, and helping to show folks that it looks really bad, and it probably is really bad, and in a lot of cases it definitely is, but that's not the end of the story.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things that I've seen is a lot of times when there's rioting going on, and when when there's upheaval, there's this quote that goes around from Mr. Rogers. And someone, a kid, I guess, wrote into him, asking, what he should do to feel less scared. Yeah. And he said, look for the helpers. Look for the people who are trying to make a difference, because in the midst of all of these things, there are always people trying to make it better. And there are always people trying to make a difference. There may not be enough of us, but we're always there. And I think if there's an important message that we can send to anyone in those situations, is look for the helpers, because we're here. You may be the only trans person in your town, wherever you live. There may not be a physical community there for you, but if you have access to the internet, you have a community. Like, we're here. So I think that's important. Hope, I think, is super important, and I think that's activism too, right? Like, just inspiring Definitely. Hope and letting people and showing people that there's a reason that they can look for tomorrow to be better than today is. And for some people, that's small comfort. I get it. I mean, there's this backlash against the whole concept of it gets better, right? Because sometimes what that feels like is you have to accept the way it is now, and it'll get better at some undefined point in the future.
And that's not guaranteed. Exactly.
And it's like, no, damn it, I want it to be better now. I want to stop suffering. I want people like me to stop dying today.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think people, it's so slow sometimes you don't see it, but it really has gotten better, just even in just my lifetime. I mean, when I was in high school, there was no way I was going to be out when I was in high school, but now kids are out all the time when they're in high school. Even in the small podunk town that I grew up in, there are apparently kids out in high school.
Yeah, and I can't deny that it's very important, especially for folks in the LGBT community, folks in the Black community, and women as well, to realize that it is important to take action to progress the movement, the movement of your community or your communities where they overlap, and that's why I'm very outspoken. My friends and family know this. I like to like my sister-in-law. I love educating her. I send her articles. I talk to her. I talk to her about things that maybe aren't as apparent to someone who's not in this particular movement, who doesn't see things as urgently as I do, or a lot of things that are very obvious to us as gay and trans people. To the mainstream society, they have no idea some of these things are happening. So I like talking about these things and telling them, just constantly, reminding her that this is still going on. This is happening. This is what's happening this week. This is where we are. And I think spreading that sort of awareness is a great form of activism, because you're educating people. You're opening their eyes to a world that they maybe can't see as well as we can.
And even. Bringing it back to the atheism side of things, like, I'm going to be honest, when I started doing this show, or like when the idea first hatched and we started doing the first few episodes, I mean, the intersection of atheist and LGBT activism made sense to me then. And the more and more I learn, the more and more it makes even more sense. I saw Sarah Moorhead talk about recovering from religion and their hotline project. And for those who don't know, I think it's 184 I Doubt It, which is great.
Yeah, I like it.
But so Recovering from Religion is not an atheist proselytizing group. They're about creating a safe place for people to ask questions.
Yeah, and I think that's very important.
And so people can call this hotline when they're struggling with their faith and they have questions and they need somebody to talk to. And she had a PowerPoint presentation where she had transcripts of some of the calls that they've gotten. And I mean, this was at the VIP dinner that she was doing this, and I had a plate of food in front of me, and I just wanted to cry. There was a 12-year-old kid who their dad found that they were in some atheist groups on Facebook or something like that, and the dad boarded up her room.
Wow.
So
that's child abuse.
Exactly. For me, being an outspoken atheist has never been such a huge deal. I've been an outspoken atheist since I was 16 or 17. And it's never really caused any more problems for me than some annoying conversations every once in a while. But it's still dangerous to be atheist, even in some places in this country. And I think that's something that's important to recognize too. And realizing that has just reinforced this idea to me that it makes sense that there's activism to be done at this intersection of atheist and LGBT activism. When people come out as gay or trans, often we risk our support system, our families, our friends, our communities, and sometimes even our lives. And there are some, most definitely places in the world, but sometimes even in this country, where you risk your safety by coming out as atheist. And I don't necessarily mean to turn this into a conversation about coming out. That's going to be a later episode. But I think it's important to keep into perspective why these things matter and what what the stakes are, really. Because it's not, quality of life is really important, but we're talking about life itself in the balance here too.
Sure. And there's a big difference between being just an outspoken atheist, and I guess what I would call an activist atheist. Right. Where, it's one thing just to go around and say, there's no God, there's no God, there's no God. And if you believe in God, you're stupid, and all these other things. Okay, that's the route some atheists take, and that's bound to happen. For me, being an activist atheist means that I care about the effects of religious harm on children. I especially care about the effects of religious harm on young gay, bi, and trans kids, because I know what that's like firsthand. And that's why we care. One of the questions I hear the most often from Christians about atheists is, why do you care so much? If you don't believe in God, then why do you care? Why do you have to talk about it? What I care about, and what I know a lot of us care about, is the effects of religious harm on our society. And that's why we talk about it. And it's okay to ask questions. Anyone who's of a scientific mind knows this. A lot of religious folks struggle with it because it goes against their teachings. But it's okay to question something. Like Carl Sagan said, if it can be destroyed by the truth, it should be destroyed by the truth. That's why it's okay to ask questions. And that was something, especially for Christians, it's entrenched in their minds to not question their faith, to never question it. The truth is, once you begin asking those questions and it begins unraveling, there's a reason for that. So it's okay to ask those questions, and it's healthy to ask those questions with any mindset or any philosophy.
I agree. And so I'll close this out with something that I posted on Facebook. Somebody introduced this show to someone else on Twitter, and I posted this on Facebook because I'm not good at 140 characters. I'm not super good at Twitter. So this person,
you can't do the tweets.
Right. So this person's response to hearing about the subject of our show was basically that I'm wary of mixing atheism and social justice. I hate to be pedantic, but that's humanism territory.
I read that comment.
And so here's what I wrote. Yes, my friend, it is humanist territory. Atheism is an intellectual position. It's a statement about one particular thing you don't believe in. If you don't take it further than that, why does it even matter? Are we going to argue the value of an intellectual circle jerk while we high-five each other over being intellectually superior to those silly believers? Please. If that's really what the atheist movement is about to you, I don't want you. I'm a humanist first, and atheism is, in my humble opinion, the shortest route to becoming a humanist. Not all atheists are humanists, and many religious people are humanists too. If you're not involved in the movement to make the world a better place for those who are underprivileged and oppressed, I don't need or want you. I consider myself an intellectual, but intellectualism for its own sake is worthless. I think about these issues and I debate these issues because I want the world I die in to suck less than the one I was born into. I don't care what God you believe in or if you believe in no God at all. If we can agree that we need evidence-based solutions to the world's problems, we're going to get on swimmingly. So yes, my show, my life, and the movement I'm proud to call myself a part of sways into humanist territory. If yours doesn't, I wish you the best, but what are you really doing?
Yeah, I want to say two things. First of all, whenever someone says, I hate to be pedantic, but my first thought is, no, you don't.
Yeah, I hate to be homophobic, but I'm not racist, but...
No, my first thought is I think you love being pedantic. That's right. My experience with people who begin a conversation that way. It's like you're not hating anything about that. But secondly, there's this total knee-jerk response to the I'm humanist and an atheist. There's this total knee-jerk response that's completely idiotic. That's basically, well, humanist is just a watered-down version of atheism. Humanism is just a watered-down version of atheism. People who call themselves humanists are just too scared to call themselves atheists. I mean, you know what? If that's where you're going to get stuck, if you're going to miss the entirety of what someone is actually getting at because you're stuck on that, it's just basically a quip and nothing more, then you need to check yourself and think about what you're really standing for. Like Callie said, my atheism is a function of my humanism. I'm a humanist first. I care about the world, and that's why I'm also an atheist because I think religion does a lot of harm to our species. You don't get to tell me that humanism or atheism wandering into humanism territory is a dangerous thing or that's ridiculous to me.
And I'm about done with people trying to use the term social justice as a pejorative.
Oh yeah. If they do, social justice warrior.
The whole social justice warrior.
I'm done with it.
Jinx.
I'm a social justice warrior, and I don't care what you think about that term. I care about social justice. I care about making the world a better place for people. And if your response to that is a pejorative call to be a social justice warrior, just leave. I don't want you. I don't want you as part of this movement. I don't want you as part of my life because you obviously don't care. Because you obviously don't care.
I don't even understand why it's a bad thing to care about social justice.
Because people are terrified to confront their own privilege is what it comes down to.
That's exactly the point. They're terrified of it. And I've seen that term SJW come up in conversations about misogyny when feminism. I've seen it come up in issues of homophobia, and there's always someone there calling someone else an SJW for caring.
And it's a conversation stopper. It's I say this to you, so I've shut you down. No, I'm done. I own that term. I own it proudly.
Yeah, and I mean, all that means is all they're saying is I'm part of the problem and I don't care.
That's it. That is exactly it. I'm part of the problem and I don't care.
Yeah, because exploring my own privilege is scary and makes me uncomfortable, so I'm not going to do it. And you're part of the problem if that's how you feel.
I couldn't agree more. And so obviously, as with most issues we discuss here, we're not gonna nail the entire thing down in one discussion. But
what?
Right.
Aw, I thought we just solved the world's problems.
Problem solved.
So I obviously think this is a super important discussion to have, and we'll probably have it again at some point. But I think the point here is that there's no one right way to do activism, and if you are taking action in your life that benefits others, then I'm proud to call you a fellow activist. Period. And if that means, you know what, I'm gonna go to bed a half hour later because a friend on Facebook needs somebody to talk to, then that's every bit as valid as anything that I or Jonathan or Daniel or anyone else in this movement does. So don't sell yourself short. We'll be back with Be a Better Ally on the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Grow your library and your vocabulary without ever looking up from your precious little smartphone. Visit atheistaudiobooks.com and start listening in minutes.
Here's an excerpt from Disproving Christianity by David G. McAfee.
Each argument and contradiction presented will bring us closer to disproving the main pillars of Christianity, using nothing more than logical thinking, statistics, scientific and historical data, and Holy Scriptures. The debates between Christians and non-Christians have raged for thousands of years, and I expect the conflict to continue. But I do hope that these arguments will allow those Christians who may not have questioned biblical fallibility in the past to realize that these texts are man-made, and they represent the ideas of those fallible individuals who created and edited the compilation of texts now considered to be the Holy Bible. They contain errors, contradictions, and a stagnant moral code which, in many ways, no longer coincides with the morality of modern man. What I hope to gain from presenting these arguments and little-known biblical passages to the reader is a sense of understanding of Scripture which may not be presented in Bible study or in church, and for good reason. If read with an open mind, I truly believe that this book will open people's eyes to the wonders of free thought in a way that other works utilizing a more philosophical approach cannot.
Disproving Christianity and Other Secular Writings by David G. McAfee is now available at atheistaudiobooks.com.
Welcome back to the show. On this week's Be a Better Ally, I want to talk about not looking down on those who can't be as involved in these movements as the rest of us are. I can say that for me, being as involved as I am is a privilege. I'm a trans person who is far more fortunate than most. I have a good job, great family, friends, and community. So it's not incredibly difficult for me to make time for doing things like this show. For some people in these marginalized groups, though, coming out and being active could very well cost them their family, friends, support system, livelihoods, and sometimes even their lives. I'm not involved in activism because I'm better or more committed than these folks. It's very simply because I'm more privileged and more fortunate. So it's my obligation to work towards the day that these folks can step up and safely take their place in our community.
You know, I've told several of my friends this, especially my straight friends, who I don't expect everyone to be as passionate about LGBT rights as I am. It's not realistic to do that, I think. And there are movements that I'm not as involved in that other people I care about are as involved in, so that's okay. But I do tell a lot of my friends that being supportive can sometimes look like just boycotting a company that has an awful position on gay rights or LGBT rights, and just showing me that you care. Sometimes it's just, talking to me about an event, or hearing me out when I'm talking about something that's important to me. Just being there to listen. Sometimes that's all they have to do. It doesn't always have to look like being out on the front lines, being super involved, and living that activist life.
Yeah, and again, this kind of comes back to a lot of the conversations that I had at ReasonCon, where, at the VIP dinner, basically they said, all the podcasters here stand up, and we all stood up, and everybody gave us, a round of applause, and I get it, like, podcasts are the reason that I'm an activist, right? Like, I've been an atheist for a long time, but, podcasts are what inspired me to be an activist and to actually get active in the community. So I get it, but I don't understand why we're any more worthy of recognition than the person who was out feeding the homeless yesterday, or the person who, that person looks like they need a friend, so I'm just going to be their friend. I don't understand why those things are any less worthy of recognition and praise than what we do.
Well, it's just because they're more visible, and so people notice them, just like you were saying before. So they're not worthy, more or less worthy, but that's why.
It's about who's more visible and more more upfront, and I get that, but I think the whole point of this segment is to encourage everyone to recognize that those aren't the only people making a difference. There are some people. Especially in different parts of the world. In the United States, it's much better to be a queer, trans, or atheist person in the United States than in many places in the world. And that's not to say it's a cakewalk in the United States, but, there are countries where being an outspoken atheist is a death penalty offense, and being gay is a death penalty offense. For some people in those countries, literally getting up every day and living is activism, because their existence is an affront to the society they live in. I don't ever want to discount that, where, literally a person's existence is a form of activism, and all they can do is struggle to continue to live, to find the next meal, to figure out where they're going to live, to find a community, to find support. Sometimes taking care of yourself in that way can be activism. And I want to make sure that we recognize that, and that we don't put ourselves as the outspoken ones, the people with an audience, on some pedestal, because frankly, we don't deserve it. Maybe we don't deserve it is too strong. I mean, it's nice to be recognized for things that you do. I don't do it to be recognized. I do it to make a difference. And at the end of the day, that's my reward. When somebody says, hey, you made a difference, like, that's the most rewarding thing to me. But I think that those people are just as worthy of recognition as we are, if not more so, because we have the luxury of sitting behind a microphone and talking for an hour about these issues. And I'm gonna once this is over with, I'm probably gonna lay down and take a nap because I feel like crap. But that's, not everybody has that luxury. And I think it's important to recognize the people who can't be outspoken and people who can't be active. The things that they're doing and the lives that they're living are just as worthy of recognition as anything that we do.
Being a friend to someone is a form of activism. Just being, I was thinking about it earlier, just being, the example of what an atheist or a humanist or an LGBT person is truly, as opposed to people's preconceived notions, is a form of activism.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just standing up and saying, "Hey, like, I'm a person, guys. I'm not a caricature. I'm not a stereotype." I mean, in a lot of ways, I am a stereotype, but
stereotypes are not necessarily untrue. They just don't tell the whole story.
Exactly, and I love that phrase. I love it. Another good one is, I don't know if I heard this somewhere or if I came up with it. I don't want to take credit for it if I heard it somewhere and I'm just appropriating it from someone. But one thing that I've taken to saying is that labels are okay, boxes aren't.
Yeah, I love that.
And I'm probably going to do a rant on an upcoming episode about labels. I don't know if there's enough there for an entire episode topic, but I've got a lot to say about labels.
I was going to say, and this is something for allies, and we can all be allies of some sort. We have straight allies, white allies, male allies. When someone's telling a joke that demeans a whole group of people, just stand up for the people that you claim to be an ally to. Tell them, that's not funny. It's not funny to demean people with that joke, and I prefer you don't say things like that in my presence. Even something as simple as that is a great form of activism, and helps to change minds and shift paradigms.
Actually, in the training that I've been doing with Glisten, they taught us a great response to gay jokes. And instead of turning around and just saying, like, that's not funny, I'd prefer you not say that kind of thing around me, what you do is look at that person and say, why is that funny?
Yeah,
I don't get it.
That's exactly, when we were talking about this before, that's one of the things that I do often, actually, is I ask them, why is that funny?
Like, explain it to me.
Yeah, because then they have to sit there and explain why this horribly homophobic or racist or misogynistic or transphobic thing they just said is hilarious, and it makes them very uncomfortable, and it's like, yeah, exactly.
The same thing when people use gay to mean bad. It's one of my least favorite things, and my response to it is I had a roommate that would constantly do that, and I just simply started using his first name to mean bad. He got really upset.
That's so Brian. God.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and before we close the episode out, I want to tread carefully here. There was some drama that happened at ReasonCon involving people that I care about, and I'm not going to comment on any of that drama. All I'm going to say is that I have a very important conversation with Chris Heathen from Unbuckling the Bible Belt on the latest episode of his podcast surrounding feminism and misogyny and LGBT equality in the latest episode of his podcast.
That was a great episode, by the way.
thank you. And honestly, it's one of my favorite conversations that I've ever had. So, like I said, I'm not going to comment on the drama. I'm not going to say anything about anyone involved. All I'm going to say is, if you're disinclined to listen to that episode because of said drama, I would encourage you to check it out because I think it's a super important conversation to have. I was deliriously tired. I was a bit less diplomatic than I normally am. It got pretty real. So I would encourage you to go check that out. It's the latest episode of Unbuckling the Bible Belt. And that, my friends, is going to do it for another episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto on Secular Media Network. I want to thank Kristen, and I want to thank my lovely co-hosts Jonathan and Daniel.
Yay!
My pleasure.
And you can reach us online at facebook.com/thegaytheistmanifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at GaytheistCallie.
I, Daniel, am on Twitter at Daniel Wolfsong.
And I, Jonathan, am on Twitter at NerdCub, that's with a K.
And you can find the show on Twitter at The Gaytheists. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, and knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.